Okay, great. So information is the oil of the 21st century and analytics is the combustion engine. So I really love this quote around, the level of innovation that technology and data and analytics is giving us, and really the benefits that come from an organization that harnesses that well. So today, in the next 30 minutes, my hope is that we can spend a little bit of time focused in on, what it means to be a data-driven organization and why customers are increasingly looking to best practice in these areas, and how that supports their appetite to be very customer-led. So we'll look at data strategy, we'll look a little bit at culture and decision culture, and really all about how cloud is enabling that for organizations and acting as a catalyst for change. So towards the end, we'll wrap up with a few stories around customers that are already on this journey, and really what is it enabling them to do and leverage. So we at Cloudera believe the future of business is data-driven. We understand that data is increasingly a strategic asset of an organization, and increasingly organizations are looking to monetize their data externally through other means. So at the heart of the data-driven organization is really the practice of quickly using data, putting data in the hands of multiple different people and decision makers at all levels of roles and responsibilities to really unlock agility, collaboration, and better insights for their business to make better decisions moving forward. So I think today we'll focus more on, how do we support that advancement through technology and what have other customers done? But, I think it's really important to start at the front, right, where we talk about the data strategy and really understand, what that means. How do we, come up with it? What does it mean to have a data strategy? And then also, what are the, it's one thing to have a plan, but how do you put that in place? And data and decision culture becomes increasingly important to that. So let's start with data strategy. Over the years, I've heard countless definitions of what data strategy or even just a normal strategy is. And it really comes down to a few things. I love the definition from Richard Rumfeld, who's a professor of business at the Anderson School of Measurement, and he really puts it down to three things. The kernel of a good strategy consists of diagnosis of the challenge. So what are we trying to solve for? Policies for dealing with it. So we should think about these more as guiding principles. So what are the limitations or the constructs that sit around us that need to govern, how far we can really drive that, or what points we are anchored off more so. And then it's things around a cohesive set of actions. So you have to have an action plan or an operational plan and how you're going to put that into practice for your organization in order for it to mean anything. Without the three of them, you don't really have a strategy, and strategies are a bandied about term, I think, where everybody, to raise the importance of different conversations. We talk a lot in strategy, but it's really about having a plan from a high level objective standpoint, understanding how that fits within your organization, and then driving the actions around it. One of the biggest things we see is that the data strategy today is being influenced a lot by the organization's cloud strategy. So if we think about some of those guiding principles, cloud strategy in particular is one that's definitely a common emerging theme within enterprise customers today. CIOs are increasingly moving workloads to cloud, and they're really challenging their CDOs or their chief data officers to think about how they move a substantial amount of the enterprise data platform to the cloud. In which ways and in various different paths that they can take. A cloud first policy might actually be one of those guiding principles, right? And it's therefore a really important part of the data strategy that an organization looks to execute upon. One related to that principle of strategy, we have behavior and values. So if you look at this data and decision culture, we've all heard the term culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you can have a world-class strategy, you can have a world-class plan, but if it doesn't fit between, your organizational readiness and it doesn't align to the culture, whether it's social norms or how people and teams are used to working and kind of winning their hearts and minds, if you are looking to enact change, it's not going to be very effective. So developing and nurturing that data culture and innovation within an organization is a really important thing for us to develop or foster as we move forward as well. But what is a data culture and how do we foster it? And, what does that mean at a practical level? So, what we see it means in organizations that do it well is leaders really setting and reinforcing a shared set of beliefs around, what's acceptable, employee perceptions, behaviors, and understanding how and why to use data to make better decisions, right? How to leverage new technology to make life easier or remove more manual work that may have existed in the past. While this does seem pretty high level, it's been written about extensively, and there's such a strong correlation between organizational culture and cloud and data success that it's an important part. We need to, we work with organizations to flesh out, but also, it needs to be part of the core plan around how you're going to get your organization from A to B. Before we dig into, a little bit more on some of the customers and where we've seen success, we also need to discuss what our ultimate aim is, right? So it's one thing to have a really strong data strategy, to know data is important, to develop a data culture, but for what end, right? And where's the competitive advantage going to be created? So that's why we think the second piece to this is really about being very customer-led. So customers are at the heart of every successful organization. And I think that, in some ways that's not groundbreaking, but it's something that we often need a reminder of. And the most successful organizations have always had customer experience at the heart of what they do, understanding and anticipating the needs of customers, sometimes before the customer even knows they have a need or a want for a product, is super important. Whether you're running a very small business all the way up to a multinational organization. So understanding what your customers want, how they're influenced, what their interests and preferences are, and increasingly, combining not only internal data that you have available within your organization, but coupling that with external data to get a fuller view of them as an individual is going to lead to running a more profitable business, understanding how to drive top line growth, etc. Understanding your customers so deeply that you can predict their behavior and potentially influence it is really the difference between being profitable and being a market leader today. And we are seeing that with some of the, digital native businesses that are popping up and disrupting various industries, right? That have got very little legacy debt. They've built kind of ground up on the cloud, and they've leveraged data and a customer-led mindset from the start. So the key to understanding customers is to listen to them directly and indirectly, which is where we talked about, some of the ways organizations are pulling data, not only from within their organization, but externally. It's also, adding a layer of complexity, but being able to increase the number of communication channels that you're able to actually take meaningful information from your customer. So, while we still purchase goods and services in stores, especially with COVID, the shift to buying online has really rocketed, and we've we don't just use mobile apps to purchase. We don't just use desktop apps. We're using a various amount of things. We browse items on a website, like a post containing a product, provide feedback, look at reviews, interact with people on third-party sites, maybe interact with a chatbot, recommend an item, write a review. The list goes on. There's a lot of different sources of data then that need to be reconciled, but they all add context about who the customer is, what they're doing, what they favor, what they'll pay for. And with each of these exchanges, you can get and build a much more valuable insight into that person or organization that you're working with. It's not just communication that's becoming increasingly digital either, but the products and services themselves. So some digital products are very tightly coupled with a specific end user or a specific device. I think we got a really good insight to that in the previous session. But for instance, you think about some of the wearable devices, health data related services captured straight onto your watch. There's not much use of a digital watch without that connecting element into the data platform that gives you the insights, etc., on how you're using it, or the IoT washing machine, or all of the connected devices that we have in our professional and private lives today. So the more digital products and services that exist, the more data points there are, the more ability to gain deeper insights. But obviously this raises the complexity level for organizations, and the challenge of combining all of these data points over time is really complex. It's really impossible manually. I mean, those days are well and truly gone, and it requires organizations to capture what is exponential growth in data, variety of types of data, and really try to simplify that for their internal stakeholders that need to use it. We can come to the same conclusion if we consider other functional departments within an organization, be it marketing, sales, support, IT, and of course, product development. Each of them have a role to play in supporting some part of the customer experience, whether they're building the products that will ultimately be taken to market, or whether they're trying to figure out what the product customer fit is and running that directly or indirectly. Providing teams with the access to this data, insights at the right time is super important, and can be supported by creating that data, the data culture that we talked about a little while before. I'm going to move on. So the next slide is really about, what are some of the motivations, or why are organizations going down this path, and what kind of benefits are they seeing from it? So the obvious benefit for becoming more data-driven and customer-centric is absolutely to drive revenue, but there are a host of other benefits that ultimately can contribute to that, or can act as, periphery benefits. So one of our customers, NG Data, built a customer data platform to help their customers become more customer-centric. So they created a platform that would basically remove some of that complexity for their end users. Their platform has helped customers increase the precision of targeted marketing by 65%. And if we look at organizations across APAC and the size and scale of their marketing budgets, a 65% increase in precision is absolutely massive. This also helped them remove wastage of spend by about 58% and increase conversions from 4 to 5x. So, we're talking about a 300 to 400% increase in conversions of lead metrics in that example. Another great example is customer satisfaction and or NPS, depending on which measure you're using internally. Increasingly, especially for digital products and subscription-based models, it's not just important to secure a customer, it's really about how long, how much growth, how much upsell opportunity, but also how long that customer stays with you. Often customer acquisition costs can be considerable, and the payback of those acquisition costs don't occur until, month 12, month 24 in some examples, etc. So having a view of, firstly, what does this data look like for your organization, but also being able to drive operational improvements to improve it and to capture, a longer lifetime value of customer or larger customers at any given point in time is super important. So if we stay with NG data as far as an example, their platform was able to increase NPS scores within their customers by an average of 15 points. NPS is generally scored out of 100. So a 15-point increase is quite considerable. This obviously helps. NPS is basically a happiness measure for your customers. Would they recommend you to other organizations or other people that they know or work with, or in their personal lives as well? And a 15% increase in that is obviously a good measure that the customer is happy. It also means new customers, but it means also a likely lifetime, a longer lifetime value for the customer that is providing, higher happiness scores as well. So organizations, particularly in a subscription or a continual basis, really leverage NPS as a key benchmark for their organization. Another one that I think is interesting that probably doesn't get enough airtime as far as, the ways to harness data within an organization to really drive, kind of top line and also bottom line results is around talent management in particular. So there's a really good 2020 study from KPMG. It was based in the US, but in 2018, over 40 million people voluntarily left their job, right? And, we talk a lot about the current COVID situation as we come out of that, how that's leading to the Great Resignation. And some people are, choosing to change jobs or organizations. Some people are choosing to change their profession. Some people are leaving, work altogether much sooner than they would have originally without the additional catalyst of COVID, right? So there's real cost for organizations in order to train, retain, and refill those roles. The cost of replacing in the study, those 40 million people was roughly 50% of the annual salary of those entry-level positions only, which is, huge when you think about, the investment organizations have to make in training and development and how long it takes to get somebody to a productive standpoint. Absolutely massive. When we looked at what the impact was for more senior type hires or senior executives, the actual cost there is closer to 200% of yearly revenue. So if we, infer the payback period for a new senior exec after losing what we hope is regrettable attrition, there's a huge financial impact to an organization of all of those things. So, by taking a data-driven training, enablement, kind of, risk or churn mitigation standpoint, we can take the guesswork out of talent development paths. With sufficient data, organizations can educate and develop employees according to their specific development needs and their specific future career aspirations and preferred ways of learning. I think there's increasingly a lot more visibility on not everyone learns the same way, right? So a more data-driven approach leads to greater transparency, meritocracy, new opportunities and promotions, hopefully based on performance rather than politics. And it helps ensure top talent is nurtured and rewarded, which ultimately, prolong the tenure of key or people in your organization that are difficult and costly to replace. Some more motivations on why it's important to become increasingly data-driven. So operations is a big one. In 2021, a white paper was created called Data Excellence, transforming manufacturing and supply systems. It was written by BCG, Boston's Consultant Group, and it's documented that 75% of executives believe that advanced analytics and in manufacturing is actually more important today than it was 3 years ago. I mean, the proliferation of IoT devices and different data points that we can use to manage the business is just huge. But it also talks about leveraging these technologies as a way to improve product reliability and stability and drive down mean time to repair as well. So, in another example, we have a European telecommunication organization. By adopting a data platform, they were able to realize operational savings estimated at around 7 million euros a year. And what that was really driven by was using predictive maintenance to avoid unnecessary maintenance or suffering from unscheduled outages that took the service down. This also had a secondary benefit of reducing customer churn. So, there's frontline cost benefits from really, making the right investments, driving the right internal culture in your organization and being customer-led. You can really start to cut down on some of those internal costs, but they're also going to help you drive top line as well when you get the associated win of reduction in churn, which ultimately drives that lifetime value of a customer. Innovation and agility is a big one as well for anyone that works, in a product organization or with vendors. Anytime the innovation that needs to happen in your product suite is happening at the speed of light. There's increased competition everywhere. People are less patient. There's a lot more competition out there. So, really being able to decide what an organization focuses on, which products they should bring to market. Data is absolutely integral to their success there. So organizations can learn or fail fast by leveraging, especially cloud services, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. But it's really about how does an organization harness data, harness the cloud to be more ready to react and to evolve in changing situations. So, this is very relevant given the COVID situation, as organizations have had to go rework, risk models, supply models, all of these kind of things. And the organizations that had really robust data systems in place already were able to pivot that much faster than organizations that, took a more traditional or, a more historical view of their business over time. There's all kinds of parts when it comes to innovation and agility that data can help with. So it can be very kind of high level around, in my UI, is this button in the right place? Like, what's the conversion rates of this and how long does it take, somebody to land on that page and then hit that button? Is it the right color? Like some very kind of nuanced things, all the way to some very serious and highly impactful pieces around where are customers abandoning their cart, right? At what point do you have a customer indicating buying signals, but then ultimately exiting out of the process before they've completed that transaction? So, being data driven is a continuum. You just have to start somewhere, and increasingly you can drive more and more maturity into that over time. I think the last piece is really around risk management. So, it's all about how do we have organizations be more confident in their decisions and therefore reduce risk. So, you take the example of Starbucks, where they have to decide where they're going to open their next store. Moving to a model based on demographics and traffic patterns mitigated a lot of risk for them. where they'd previously opened stores with less data and they had to start closing those. So I think they closed about 100 stores in 2008 because they weren't necessarily in the right points for them to drive the kind of foot traffic they needed to make them profitable stores. One of the more obvious use cases in this area is also around data and insurance companies like MetLife. So they're using telemetry data from vehicles to adjust premiums, right? In slew with a bunch of other different data points. But, you know, good drivers, especially ones with limited driving experience. So, you know, the traditional under 25 group that's always been much more expensive to insure. You know, whether they have no claims bonuses, etc., can be given a more competitive rate on insurance using some of that, you know, vehicle telemetry as well. So, you know, they're looking to source more customers without increasing their overall risk profile, and data is helping enable them to do that. The next part I'm going to go on to is just a little bit around some of our customers. So I wanted to give you some real-time examples. I won't go into all of these, but I do want to touch on a couple. So Komatsu is a global mining equipment organization. They specialize in excavation of energy and industrial hard rock materials, that kind of thing. They provide a cloud-based IoT solution to their customers with real-time data and analytics obtained from its smart connected devices and assets in the field. They use CDP platform on Microsoft Azure to help democratize data access to machine data and analytics to various groups depending on their roles and the way they want to, you know, leverage that data. The main output of that is it allows Komatsu to make accurate fact-based decisions and partner with customers to improve safety, productivity, and operating costs. So 3 absolutely integral benefits, all in a very different way, and really focused in on their customers and how they're using their machinery in order to be successful. The other one I wanted to touch on is around HelloFresh. So HelloFresh is an organization disrupting the grocery industry. I don't know how many people may have used it here. I've been a customer in the past, but they basically, you know, you purchase a week's worth or a number of meals and they'll give you, you know, the instructions digitally online and how to cook that. And then also all the ingredients that you need outside of like kind of standard stuff that everyone's got in the cupboard. They had a concern around running, you know, getting the right level of insights to be driving the right recipes, to be targeting the right customers, etc. So they worked with us. They're running on AWS, and we've allowed them to analyze more than 15 terabytes of data, give them a 360-degree view of their customers, personalized recommendations, upsell opportunities, accurate forecasting, which is really important when you're dealing with fresh goods, elasticity to scale, and you know, democratization of the data to various people in the organization in order to be able to provide their, you know, their services well. So currently they're running around 2,500 different BI dashboards that help power their business in a bunch of different ways. Another one I'm going to touch on, and I'll just, in the interest of time, I'll try and speed it up. So we also have an FSI credit data platform, and I think this is where you get a really good appreciation for really what the impact of the cloud technology as an underlying factor to really drive this innovation in data that is possible. So global FSI credit data platform, so they work with organizations, you know, they're a third-party provider to the big banks in order to do risk and fraud type detection for their customers. So they were using a proprietary on-prem software. It worked okay, but it was a real dampener as far as helping them innovate and enter new markets. So the cost model for the platform, wasn't at a level where they could really start to think a bit more structurally about innovation and entering new regional markets where the cost model was kind of prohibitive for what they expected to get out initially. So we worked with them, very highly regulated, and we worked with Amazon as well to move them to a fit for purpose architecture that really unlocked a few things for them. So they expanded much faster. They were able to deliver services to their current customers a lot faster than they had been in the past, but also much faster expansion into those new markets and geographies because they had a cost model better aligned to their revenue model. So ultimately, the things that this drove was a lowered OPEX of about $200,000 a month, which is substantial, right? A very large customer. So, it's a portion of their overall, but still substantial. And the most important thing, it drove product revenue growth by more than 30% with their entry into the new markets. So we think about top line growth and where organizations can go and look for that. Having a more scalable, agile platform with better insights absolutely can help you do that. The kicker is also, as they went through all of that, they didn't have to expand their risk profile or their cost profile to do it. So the level of investment and the payback for that was much lower than it would have been. But they also got to leverage things like SDX to make sure that they had really strict enterprise control, governance, data lineage, all of those good benefits to make sure that those, those investments were good and they weren't exposing themselves to an unnecessary amount of risk. Business use cases require the data lifecycle. So, we work with customers all the time to leverage best of breed solutions, but also look at the overall integration picture across the entire life cycle, everything from bringing the data in, to making sure it's fit for purpose, to, how we're going to present that, how we're going to, run queries, etc., all the way to machine learning and AI and some of the predictive modeling that, help customers anticipate things like predictive maintenance, etc. And really those are all linked around enterprise use cases. So increasingly, people aren't focused on the technology. It's more about, I've got this problem within an organization, or I'm looking to mature this area of my business. How can I use technology? How can I use the cloud? How can I get more maturity around my data lifecycle in order to do that? So that's something that we do with customers all of the time. And we like to really base it around the power of and. So, it's not enough to be, all cloud or a single cloud only. We really focus in on being hybrid and multi-cloud and having a customer run edge to AI wherever they want across multiple infrastructures and making that seamless and reducing silos for customers. The end-to-end is really important. All organizations are trying to figure out how to rationalize the application landscape. I was talking to a customer the other day that has over 1,100 applications within their organization that they're looking to get down to 100. So then it becomes very important around, what are those key platforms that can help you remove substantial complexity overhead in your application landscape. Secure and govern, so, versus basic security, but I would also say multiple security tools. Security landscape is really quite challenging, and having one skills and expertise just generally is tough, but then having niche skills in multiple different platforms, or whether they infrastructure platforms or software as a service platforms, and doing all that integration really can open up organizations to a lot of risk around misconfiguration and those kind of pieces. Open source, absolutely, you know, it's part of the overall landscape. It needs to connect to everything else that you're doing, and you want to prevent as much as possible that proprietary lock-in and also integration costs of you know, less open source type solutions. And we obviously talk very heavily around platforms. So, you know, how do you make the right decision for the use case you have today, but also unlock the agility and the innovation that can come from being able to deploy future use cases as and when needed in order to drive, you know, all the benefits we've talked about in this session through that. So that's really it from us. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them in Q&A. You know, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or please feel free to reach out anytime, and we'd love to talk to you about, you know, how we might be able to help you and your organization with some of these challenges and also solutions that we've covered today.